Thank you, Bren, for that very kind introduction. And yeah, I've preached in Scotland for about 20 years, all over the country. I've never had an experience like tonight. I'll not go into it or we'll use up all our time. But I'm here. I couldn't believe I'm here. It's nothing short of a minor miracle. I think there was opposition against me being here tonight. So what I'd like to do is focus on the book of Ruth to kind of give us some, if you like, principles and learnings about how I think God looks at work through the eyes of Boaz and Ruth. And then we'll kind of, as Brent was saying, bleed that into a little bit of testimony. And I just thank you for your patience with my disorganized approach to tonight. So thank you for that, Brent, and appreciate your prayer as well and your friendship over so many years. So thank you. So if you want to turn to Ruth, I asked for Ruth chapter 1 to be read to give us the context, but we're going to use that as a springboard into Ruth chapter 2 because I don't want to assume everybody knows the story of Ruth. If you have 15 minutes, please do read it from end to end. It's an amazing story, one of my favorite books in the Bible. And you'll have heard the reading about Naomi. And basically, chapter 1 is her life going into free fall. She is leaving Israel, going to Moab with her husband and her sons. They marry Moabite women, which kind of technically they probably shouldn't do. There's famine in the land, and what happens, she loses all of the males in her life, the breadwinners, the providers. And so she faces this critical moment at the end of chapter 1, where basically she's ready to go back empty-handed. And she says to Orpah, you go back. And she does, the two daughters-in-law. And she says to Ruth, you also go back. I'm going back on my own. And we've got that beautiful passage in Ruth where Ruth says, no, where you go, I will go, and your gods will be my God. And we're not sure exactly what Ruth understood at that very moment of Jehovah God, but it's this beautiful step of loyalty and solidarity with her mother-in-law at a moment when they have absolutely nothing in their lives. And so you have, if you like, the book of Ruth starts at the bottom, and you wonder what's going to happen. Well, what happens is, in Ruth chapter 2, they go back to Israel, and you have this beautiful interaction with a man who is a bit of a stranger to Ruth, but known to Naomi, called Boaz. And I want to read parts of chapter 2 as we jump through it, but I want to look at it from three elements about work, actually. So the first one is work as provision. And if you look at the story, they go back to Israel, and Ruth, in chapter 2, they say, let's go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. And the image here is of Ruth and Naomi having no money, no property, nothing to trade to get food. So they're very poor. And there's this practice in the Old Testament of whenever they're out in the farms cutting the hay by hand, the grain, sometimes there would be ones around the corners of the field or like dropping out of the bundles. And there was this practice of gleaning that if you know your Bible, in Leviticus, God says, basically, don't go over your harvest fields a second time, leave it for the poor. So the idea is that they would come through the field once, and then whatever was left, all these people would kind of scurry around, picking up a stalk here, a stalk here. And this is what Ruth is doing. This is her job. So she goes into the harvest field and begins gleaning. And then what happens? Well, she is welcomed. The owner of the field comes, and Boaz, I love, if you look at verse 4, I love this because this is like, if you're in the workplace or you've been in the workplace, I'm sure this is familiar to you. Your boss comes into the office and says, the Lord be with you. Anybody had that experience? I certainly haven't. And what do they say? The Lord bless you, they answered. So you have this beautiful interaction between Boaz and his workers of the Lord being in the midst of them as they work. And he sees Ruth and he says, oh, who's that young woman belong to? So he asks about her. And it turns out that Ruth is a Moabite. And you have this idea in verse, you've got the gleaning and the harvesting, and you've got Boaz being the benevolent farmer and looking after his people. And he actually, as we look through it, he's going to look after Ruth. He's going to welcome her to his table to eat with them, and he's going to make sure she leaves with a big barley bushel, as it were, with a big sack to take her back to Naomi. And it's a beautiful picture of God providing for the Israelites. In chapter 1, it's a time of famine. In chapter 2, the land is being blessed. And this is the harvest time, a time of celebration. This is the pinnacle of their entire year. And so God has blessed the farming, he's blessed Boaz, and then Boaz is blessing the rest of the people. And so we have this beautiful picture of work being a provision. Now, I don't know how you see your work. When I look at my work has provided for me, but it doesn't always provide, right? There's times when we don't have a job, and I've been made redundant twice in my career. Brent gave you the highlights. There's like lowlights in there as well. And I actually got made redundant from Wood Mackenzie and Wood Group. So I'm not taking it personally, but there were things happening. There were other things happening. And so there are times when you look at your life and you think, Lord, where are you in this? And work has not provided. And perhaps you can relate to that. Not everyone has a job or a dream job that they love. And where is God in the midst of our work providing for us? What do we do when work doesn't provide? Who are we going to turn to? We have Naomi in chapter 1, goes to Moab, goes to a foreign field, the foreigners, to try and find food. What would we do in that situation? Where would we turn? Well, we have the Father's provision, don't we? We've just taken communion, a sign of God's provision for us in all things. He cares for the birds of the fields. He makes the flowers beautiful, even though they wither within days. And yet he provides for all our needs. Not all of our wants, not all of our corporate desires or aspirations to do well at work or to be higher up. But he provides our needs, and that is what he's promised to do. So secondly, work as protection. Look at verse 9 with me. Boaz approaches Ruth and he says, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another's field and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." And also in verse 22, we read, Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." Now, we have to put ourselves in the mindset and the image of ancient Israel, and you have all of these probably burly farmers, strong guys, wielding these machetes, cutting the grain, and there's the gleaners. Now, probably most of these are going to be women. They may be young. They may be unattached, like Ruth's attached to Naomi, but some of them may not be attached. The poor, vulnerable. And what could happen? Your mind doesn't need to wander very far to think what could happen in a field in the middle of nowhere between these two groups. And yet, what does Boaz do? He says, "I have put a hedge around you. Stay with my people. I've told them not to touch you. Stay and you'll be safe." And we have this beautiful image of Boaz not just looking after, he's got a culture with his workers. We saw that at the beginning. The Lord bless you, and they respond, the Lord bless you. So he has this understanding of the God of Jehovah. And yet the women, the gleaners, are not his employees. He's not responsible for them. And yet, if you like, he puts his protective wings over the top of the poor and the destitute, and Ruth is in the midst of that. And in fact, that picture of the hen covering her chicks is a beautiful image that runs throughout Ruth. And this is the Boaz, the worker, Boaz, the CEO, being a blessing to those who don't work for him. And I think this is a beautiful picture of the father heart of God. Now, as a father myself, sometimes we can be a bit fearful to say, I want to protect my family, my children, my wife. We get all nervous about talking about masculinity and wanting to protect those that we love. But I do believe this is the heart of God, that he wants to protect those who are vulnerable, those who are the weakest and the poorest and the least. And Ruth is certainly in that setting. And what Boaz does, he protects her, and he ensures that if Ruth puts in an honest day's work, she will get out an honest day's work, and she'll not be harmed in any way. And he's a beautiful model of a manager, Boaz. Someone once said to me that the role of a manager is to remove the barriers for their team to flourish. I think sometimes they get it the wrong way around, these managers, and they think their job is to create barriers. But I don't know if you can relate to that. I mean, I've had many bosses. In fact, Brent was saying when I was at Wood Group for 11 years, I had 10 bosses in 11 years. And many of those, I think, thought it was their job to make life pretty tough. And yet we have Boaz here clearing the obstacles away, setting a protective hedge around all of the people who are touched by his farming ministry, you could say. And this protection was physical and it was psychological. He made a point of saying to Ruth, you're safe here. Stay here. You're safe. But what about when work doesn't protect? And I read recently about the Institute of Directors. They've written a code of conduct, and it says, this is how you should behave if you're a director of a company. This is the code of conduct we should stick to. And I think there's something good about that, but I also thought, it's a shame that we have to write these things down, isn't it? And say, this is what good looks like. In the olden days, it would just be called common sense or being a good person or being a decent person. We all kind of knew what a good person in the workplace should do. And yet now, we have to write it down and say, oh, here's it written down and you didn't stick to that, so you're out, kind of thing. So it's a totally different world now. And work sometimes doesn't protect us. And I don't know if you've ever seen that in your workplace, but they talk about this kind of toxic environment. Have you ever been in one of those where you're afraid to speak up? I was in a situation where my boss lived by making everyone fearful of him, and everyone was petrified. And as a Christian who finds your courage in God to speak up when others are silent, how do you do that in a way that doesn't bring the suffering that you're not looking to cause problems, but you're also wanting to stand up and say, this actually isn't right. How do we do that in a loving way? Because sometimes our workplace doesn't protect us, and it even can be very unfair and unethical. I think in the midst of it, we see the model of God, don't we? This Father's protection of the vulnerable, of his people. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, the shepherd protects the flock. He defends and he protects. And I think if you've been in a situation in the past where you have a team of people, I think that is our responsibility to protect those that were given by God. And then lastly, workers' abundance, verses 15 and 16. And we see in these verses, as she got up to glean, I love this bit, Boaz gave orders to his men. This is about Ruth. Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some of the stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. I just love this image of, he's like, guys. It's like, see those cleaners over there? Do a really bad job in this field. It's fine. Just like keep dropping stuff out the back and like some nice chunky, Can you imagine picking up one stalk at a time, how tiring that would be? And he's like, just pull some out and like leave a nice little, and then turn away. It's just this beautiful image of Boaz, benevolent Boaz, we could call him. And this is work, not just giving people. Like, if you looked at it technically, the Levitical law, Boaz had already done what the Levitical law said when he allowed them into his field to glean, really. That was it. But he goes above and beyond that. He says to the gleaners, stay here. That's the first thing he's doing above and beyond, to say, stay here. And then he also invites them to his table to eat. And now he's going way above what's expected. And he's actually losing profit that these people who have nothing can benefit. And Ruth is in the midst of that. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You know the story of Ruth, and you know what's going to happen in chapter 3 and 4, and you're thinking, Martyn, we know exactly what Boaz is thinking here. He quite likes Ruth, and so this is a bit romantic. And we don't know ultimately all of his motives, but we do know from chapter 3 that he's a man of godly character. He's a man of integrity. And he may like Ruth, but there's also probably a lot of other gleaners in the field that he's also blessing through this act. So I'm taking this as Boaz being the benevolent Boaz who is looking to bless people, one of whom is Ruth. At least that's what I'm sticking to at this point. So we have this idea of abundance, work abundantly blessing. And I don't know if you've ever been in this environment where it's like God is blessing you in your work, and it could be spiritual work or it could be secular work. But what God is teaching me more and more is actually God doesn't think in those categories. He thinks of you as a person serving him. Whether you get paid for that or you don't get paid for it, doesn't matter to God. There are things I do, and I've just taken a new job actually, Brent. So I'm working for an engineering company 4 days a week. And for the last 3 years, I've been doing freelance. And then I got this contract in March, and I started working with this really, really nice guy. And then he said to me around September time, "What do you want to do?" And I said to him, "I want to be permanent." And he says, "Well, I want you to be permanent as well." So it's like, great. And so we kind of negotiated, and I said, "I want to be 4 days a week." That was one of my kind of negotiating things. And he's like, "That's fine, we'll do that." And so now God has given me this beautiful 4-day-a-week permanent job for an amazing company with a great boss doing this fantastic work. I love what I do. And then I have this other day, mostly Fridays, where I do the other stuff Brent was talking about, and don't get paid, but I love what I do. And then at some point, some money lands in my bank account. I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but it's all mixed together. And I kind of look at it that whatever we're doing, and I know Brent was saying, some of us have retired. Whether we're paid or we're voluntary or we're retired or working, it's all service. It's all ministry. And God puts us in these places like Ruth and Boaz. Sometimes we feel that abundance. I don't know if you've ever felt that. I'm feeling right now, actually, and this is only since November probably when I started permanent, the abundance of a great team around me and a great boss. But work isn't always abundant, is it? You remember in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 17, when he says, "If there's no ewes in the stalls, there's no crop, there's no harvest, yet I will praise him." Even when all of these things are taken away, our work, our health, our family, yet I will praise him. We don't idolize work, but we do see it as a provision and even sometimes as an abundance. So as we finish in Ruth, and we see this beautiful interaction between the two of them and work underpinning this love story. We often look at Ruth as a love story, but we change the filter, look at it through the lens of work. Actually, you jump out and you see Boaz in a totally different light as this benevolent business owner. So this context that we have here, I want to ask you how you feel in your context of work. And do you experience some of these things? I've been asking you all the way through. Well, very briefly, I want to say my experience has been very different. When I went to Wood Group in 2011, I was doing my job and met a few people who were Christians, but a lot of people, it took about 4 years to meet a Christian, and there was someone very senior right at the top of the company, and we were having drinks in her kitchen. There was about 10 of us, and she sidled over to me and said, "Martyn, I go to church as well." And I was like, great. But my heart sank because she was afraid that people knew that she was a Christian. And something kind of lodged in my soul, because we shouldn't be afraid to speak up. We're not pushing it down people's throats, but we also shouldn't be afraid. And so to cut a very long story short, I knew by 2018, I knew about 12 Christians. And God had prompted me to say, look, we were in a meeting, and one of the other staff network groups, I probably don't need to say which one, was being championed for getting a certain award, a gold award, or we're trying to get a silver award. And they're like, push, 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 push. Well, this is our agenda, and we're going to drive it through this company. And I felt God say to me, if you want to do something about it, if you're not happy about this, you do it. And I was like, This is a 40,000 company business. It looks like £6 billion revenue. It's a big company. And you're like, how do I do this? And so I went around 12 people who I knew were Christians, and I said, I want to start a Christian group. Are you with me? No. Okay, next people. You want to start a Christian group? Eventually, I found 3 guys who were willing to set it up. And we got together, we had lunch together, and we said, are we going to do this? And we said, yes, we're going to do it. And you know what? We didn't ask for permission. We went onto the internal social media, and we clicked set up a new group, and we set up the first ever Christian group in Wood Group in June. I think it was June 2018. And we waited to see what would happen. We waited for the avalanche of people coming after us. And do you know what happened? Nothing. Nothing at all. And we started a weekly, I think it was fortnightly or monthly. It was all during COVID. We were praying for each other, praying for the company. And by the time I left, there was 77 people from all over the world on the Christians at Wood Group. And this other story, I don't know how long I've got, but I'll tell you one more story. The other thing that I said was, Lord, help me to kind of make it official. I didn't want to be undercover. I wanted it to be recognized by the company. And so I prayed about it, and I got help from this organization called Transform Work. And they said, well, a lot of companies, secular companies, have multi-faith committees that all the faiths kind of plug into. And I was like, okay, I'm not like an ecumenical focused person to kind of make a blancmange of, I want to actually keep the faiths distinctive, but actually, could I help other faiths to be set up? So I prayed about it, and then they invited me on the Global Diversity and Inclusion call. So there's probably about 300 people on the call, and you can imagine who's on the Global Diversity and Inclusion call. And I'm in my living room during COVID on my computer going, okay, here we go. And so they said, right, Martyn's going to speak to us about this new Christian group that's been set up. And so I told them what had happened, and I said, but I realized that as a secular company, we also, perhaps there's Muslims out there who also want to set up a group, or Hindus or whatever, and I want you to know that if that's you, I'm here to help. And I've never felt so conflicted as to what I was doing, but I felt God was leading me into this place of the unknown. And in the end, no Muslims came forward, no Hindus came forward. But now, and then we still got the Christian group. Now I'm in another company who have a Christian group, and they're weak. They're not confident. And so God sent me there. There's 33 of them, but the company's like huge. So please pray. The company's called Arup, and I'm praying for this event on the 5th of February called Connect Hope. And it's got the race group, the early careers, it's got LGBT, it's got culture, all these different staff net groups, but no faith group. So I contacted the person, it's in the Edinburgh office, and I said, look, there's a Christian chapter, can I be involved? And they said, okay. So we're going to be talking about hope in the office on the 5th of February in Edinburgh, alongside all of the other staff networks. And this is like the first time, I think, I don't know any other Christians in Edinburgh, but this is, please pray that some of the Christians would have confidence to come together and to have fellowship together, because I've found it to be so beneficial. Anyway, I'm going to finish and then go to Brent, because this is kind of why I'm doing all the other stuff, really, is because God has told me to gather the Christians together across Scotland in the workplace so that they feel confident and stronger together. So if you are in a company and you want a group, come and speak to me. And we're going right across Scotland. We've got breakfast. We have business breakfast every month. There's one in Edinburgh and Glasgow on Tuesday. We had one in Aberdeen last Friday. And we're gathering the Christians together. And we're also training the Christians to be confident in their workplace. So that's what Thrive is. So yeah, I think I'll finish there because I could keep going. So thank you.